Let's bring in now former Prime Minister Tony Abbott, who joins me. We will talk, Tony, about your documentary. It's screening tonight live here at 7:30 p.m. Well, it's not live, it's a documentary, but you'll get it here at Sky on this channel at 7:30. That will definitely be on. But before we get to talk about that, I have to get your reflections on what is an historic day, as I've said, not just for the Middle East, not just for Israel, but for the whole world.
Peter, obviously this is a moment of unalloyed joy for the families of the hostages. The hostages should never have had to endure 2 years of captivity. What happened on October the 7th was an utter barbarity and atrocity, almost beyond words. All credit to President Trump for his efforts. I really think that the key to all of this has been the unremitting pressure that Bibi Netanyahu has kept up on Israel's enemies. And to me, I think the most critical intervention of all, on top of everything else, such as the exploding pages and walkie-talkies, the demolition of the Iranian air defences, the attacks on Yemen, etc. The coup de grace, if you like, was the Israeli attack on Doha itself, where the Hamas leadership was meeting. And I think what that indicated to the Gulf states, particularly to Qatar, was that the game was up, that there was no more cost-free way to support Hamas. So I think it's that utter relentless determination of Bibi Netanyahu to ensure that all of Israel's enemies have been humiliated that's brought about this happy day. Now, all of the points that have been made by people like Greg Sheridan and others are correct. In the end, Hamas does need to be disarmed. A more decent and humane administration in Gaza has to be established. There's now an incipient civil war between different factions in Gaza. There's been serious gunfighting between Hamas and other strong forces. I hope that the other strong forces get the upper hand, but let's hope if they do, they turn out to be a group that's prepared to accept Israel's right to exist behind secure borders. And I do share Greg's scepticism about the willingness of the Arab states to get involved. Let's face it, the best solution all along to this would have been if Egypt had resumed control of Gaza, as it had pre-1967, and if Jordan resumed control of those parts of the West Bank which are not Israeli settlements. That would have been by far the best outcome, but for some reason there appears to be this deep reluctance on the part of Israel and Jordan to exercise what I would have thought would have been the responsibilities of decent countries who want peace in a troubled part of the world.
I guess the challenge here will be for the Sunni nations that we have discussed that will meet at Sharm el-Sheikh with President Trump after he speaks to the Knesset, which is due at about 7 o'clock Australian time, 7 p.m. Australian time, his address. That these, what I would call relatively global citizens, these nations who have supported President Trump, United States and Israel, obviously, to get to this position where they are today, that they come in behind the normalisation of Gaza, because we know when refugees were fleeing in the early stages of this war, Australia took 3,000. No one in the neighbouring area were taking anybody from Gaza. They are concerned about growing terrorism outbreaks in their countries, absolutely justifiably so. But we need the Sunni Muslim global types, if I can call them that, to really now put their throat on the Shia Muslims who are into, radical Islam and jihadism, if we have any hope of the world turning the corner, because the United Nations is weak. The United Nations just met in New York. It had no resolution of this issue. It, kowtowed and recognised Palestine. That did not get us to where we are today. Standing firm in the defence of Israel and the values of Israel and the values of the broader world. That's what's held firm, and that's precisely why Donald Trump was able to do what Joe Biden couldn't do, and what Tony Blair and what Keir Starmer and our own Prime Minister could not do. So how do we move beyond this so that we don't just return hostages but have a situation like this in 10 or 15 years' time, Tony?
Well, exactly right, Peter. Hamas have got to be eliminated. No one can be in control of Gaza and the West Bank. That is essentially a death cult dedicated to the utter and total destruction of Israel. Otherwise, this is just, if you like, a truce, a temporary peace, an aberration. If we do not permanently see the end of death cult control of Gaza, well, it's not finished, it's not done. And really, if I may dwell on the domestic situation for a second, what is wrong with our country and our people that those who were demonstrating vociferously and almost constantly on our streets these last 2 years, they never demanded the release of the hostages, they never demanded an end to Hamas rule, they never demanded that Hamas recognise Israel's right to exist. In the end, all of this was just relentlessly anti-Israel. Effectively, it was Jew hatred, and I hope a lot of these people feel ashamed of themselves, frankly.
I know you've got your book behind you. We'll talk about your documentary in a moment, but, you know, one of the standouts in your book, and you talk about a lot of episodes in Australian history, but you celebrate a lot of individuals. And I always think of John Monash, the brilliant Great War Australian general, of course, who later on came to Victoria and opened up the coal seams of the Latrobe Valley and set the whole country up for the prosperity that came after that. I think of him as a great Australian, and when he died, the streets were lined in Melbourne of Australians from all walks of life paying thank you to this great man who just happened to be Jewish. So can we put the genie back in the bottle, Tony? Can we put to bed and remove that scourge, that stain of anti-Semitism from our Australian community? Because you're right to point out about the protesters. They're out there on the weekend. They're saying that they will not abate, that they will keep going. They've got everything they wanted to out of this last couple of years. Can we go back to the Australia that we had pre-October 7?
Well, I do think that has to be our hope and our expectation. And one of the disappointing things to me, Peter, has been the way Australian governments, with the partial exception perhaps of the New South Wales government, have been reluctant to take strong action against these protests, which haven't been an exercise in free speech. They've essentially been an exercise in intimidation of Jewish Australians. And I think that, frankly, the bulk of the Australian people would like to see the police in charge of our streets. They would like to see the governments in control of our streets, not these, at times, violent but constantly intimidatory pro-Hamas, quasi-Marxist protest movements. So let's hope we've seen the end of all of this, and let's hope there's a bit of serious rethinking. One of the points that you've made from time to time, Peter, in your broadcasts and columns is we need the Muslim leadership in this country to say, look, enough is enough. Jewish people have a right to exist. Israel has a right to exist. By all means, disagree, but disagree civilly. And what I hope will grow out of what we've seen over the last little while is an appreciation by Muslims everywhere that other religions have rights. Other faiths and nations have rights. This idea of death to the infidel has been an absolute blight on Islam. It's been an absolute blight on the Middle East. And let's hope a lot of people here and around the world wake up to that.
Yes, well, I'd like to hope that you've, put some sense into some hearts that are watching around the country tonight. But you and I were both there in Afghanistan at a service to basically hand back Tarin Kot, the Australian base, to the Afghani people. And we saw there not so long after that, when the United States left in an appalling fashion under Joe Biden, just how entrenched now the Taliban is and how all the rights for women have been absolutely eroded and the rights for citizens across the board. So I hope you're right. I hope I'm wrong, but I watch with trepidation. Now, the documentary, 7:30 tonight, I know it has been, like the book, a labour of love. I know that everyone watching tonight is going to tune in at 7:30 and many more as well. Tell us why it was so important to you to write this book and to tell this story, as we'll see tonight.
Well, Peter, I think we are a great country, and I think too often in recent times we have underestimated ourselves. We've focused on the unfortunate aspects of our history, which are relatively few and far between, and not on the great achievement of the Australian nation. Let's never forget that within 100 years of 1788, that bedraggled group of convicts had become a pioneer in democratic freedom and had produced the world's highest standard of living. And towards the end of the 1800s, in South Australia and elsewhere, we had full adult suffrage for men and for women. Aboriginal people could vote, with a few restrictions in Queensland and Western Australia, to be sure. But nevertheless, this is an incredible achievement. And along the way, we produced some wonderful people, not just Governor Phillip, but people like the first Attorney General of New South Wales, John Plunkett, who prosecuted the Myall Creek massacre perpetrators. We need to remember these heroes who have produced modern Australia, which above all else, from that day to this, is a country where people can come from anywhere and get a fair go, particularly if they're prepared to have a go.
I just want to see everyone buy these for Christmas presents, particularly if you've got a young person in your life. And if they're not going to read it, grandma, grandpa, mum and dad, aunt and uncle, get the book and read it to them, because I want them to have a balanced, a fair and a positive view of our country and our country's history, because they are, as you know, Tony Abbott, our future. Thank you. I know it's been a labour of love, as I've said, and I know you're you're a bit like the bridegroom or something on the just before the wedding service. That you want it all to go well. You want it to come off very, very cleanly and to be well supported. I hope that absolutely happens. I know you're at a book launch. I know you've got to go, but I really thank you for joining me tonight.